Our ultimate goal, we have just kind of a unit number in mind that we're shooting for between me and my husband. And at the end of the day, when we were goal setting, we're like, well, what do we want to do, for making more money? We would really like to focus on charity work. Mm-hmm. And providing housing for, single mothers is something that my husband's just really passionate about.
This is the real estate investing experience. We get it. Real estate can be rough sometimes, and that's why we bring in the experts to talk about the experiences you won't hear anywhere else with your hosts, John Cohen and Chris Grinzik.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Experience. I'm your host, Chris Grenzig. With me, as always, is John Cohen. How are we doing?
We're doing good. We are got a lot of moving parts today. Today's not a good day to be recording a lot of podcasts. But I did officially just close on our mobile home park we sold.
Congrats!
So excited about it. We real quick story. We bought the deal last year in August, and I had it wholesaled, and the guy that we were wholesaling it to, it's a $20,000 wholesale fee on a $480,000 deal, right? Not crazy. He tried to stick it to us at the last minute. So he's like, yeah, I'll give you $5,000. And I was like, dude, no. He's like, well, you're going to lose the deal and I'll just call the owner. So I said, okay, fine, I'll buy it. So I bought it. So I bought it all cash. And then we listed it with a broker. We sold it. We sold it for $650. So I made significantly more money than wholesaling it. And the kid emailed me because he saw the deal was blasted out there. And he said, yeah, I thought I'd take advantage of that one. I said, yeah, you just missed a relatively decent profit. So He got greedy. We won. I just got off the phone confirming wire instructions. So I believe the wire hasn't hit yet, though. So I'm probably jinxing something.
Oh, look what you've done. But luckily, it won't be out for a couple weeks. So you'll get it clear.
Exactly. But that was just awesome. It was really good news right before lunch. So I was excited about that. So you can imagine what it's like dealing with closing statements and back and forth. So I've been trying to do that while doing podcasts. It was interesting. This was supposed to close Thursday of last week. So we've already delayed it. So there was so many back and forths, but we're at the finish line. It's going to be a really nice little deal. So it's exciting.
Yeah, no, it's great. Moral of the story, don't try to stick it to John Cohen at closing.
There you go. I love it. I love the moral of the story, right? I will get it done.
Exactly.
But it was a good one. So we're on to the next. But so far, I can't complain. My day is off to a good start or awesome. Good end, whatever you want to consider it.
Your break was better than mine. I had another noise complaint, so that was fun. Dealing with that. So I'm going to be dealing with it after the phone call. But it is what it is, right? It's what I signed up for, I guess.
It was funny. I was talking to somebody. I said, Chris, the conversation with Chris now is like he gets at least 3 complaints a day. One noise, then the other guy, and then the other guy. I said, that is why we do not do that ourselves, although it's something that I want to put the glutton of punishment on my table. Luckily, Corona really derailed some plans for us, but you are now living it, my friend, so I cannot say I'm jealous.
It's really not that bad. It's only here and there, and I make it sound a lot worse than it is. It's only here and there. And it's also, it's inherited tenants. There are problems with the property. So a lot of the complaints are justified. So hopefully once we can come in and do these renovations, clean it up, re-tenant it, hopefully I can do a good job and find quality tenants and people who aren't going to annoy each other. It'll go smoother, but we'll see what happens.
I'll see.
Yeah. But let's jump into today's episode. We got a really great guest on today. Excited to hear her take, and I'm sure she can probably chime in on some of the things we were just talking about too. But with that being said, Kayla, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. So kick us off to everybody a little bit about you, where you're from, your backstory, and what you're doing.
So I'm from Rochester, New York, which is like way upstate, almost Canada. Mm-hmm. And I moved down to Westchester for college. So that's where I started my real estate career, was shortly after college down in Orange County, New York. Got my real estate license when I was 21, got linked up with a big house flipping company down there. I worked as their operations manager for about 3 years, flipping houses down in the suburbs of New York City, like Westchester, Southern Connecticut, Fairfield County, that kind of area. Worked with them for a few years, and then I decided I really wanted to go into buy and hold investing. And that's a tough game right around New York City. So I moved up to Rochester, where I was from, one, to be closer to family, but two, because it's a great buy and hold market. And last year, my husband and I bought our first 30 units of buy and hold, and we are buying 30 more this year.
Love it. What was the reason or the catalyst in the recognition that flipping wasn't for you and buying rentals was going to be the route you ultimately wanted to go down?
Yeah. So, for me, there's like pros and cons to both, right? Like there's obviously, we self-manage, right? So like we get all those phone calls that you get that's like, my neighbor's messing with my laundry machine or like, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, flipping and wholesaling is it's so transactional, it's so high volume. You've got to keep going. Like if you stop or take a break, you're not making money. I can go away for a month. I don't have to acquire anything else for a month, and my business can run, and I can do that. And my rent is still due on the 1st. So, for me, long term, I want, the multiple streams of income that buy and hold kind of gives you.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. It makes a ton of sense. And I will say too, going from the thousands of units that, had a Toro with John and coming now down to a 16 unit that I am personally invested in, not that I wasn't invested in Toro deals. It is way more satisfying to see those checks come in earlier on than a month than when like you're doing it as a job and like with investors. Cause it's just like, it's expected. It's what's supposed to happen. It's, projected revenue, just like, okay, we're at X%. But here it's like, because it's so small and now I know all the units and I know the people in them, it's like, oh yes, this person paid and that person paid. And it was like just the other day, I've got 16 units, 14 are occupied. I'm purposely holding back the 2 to renovate and taking a little bit longer than I should, but for a good reason, hopefully. And I've got 2 notorious late payers and 1 that's delinquent that's probably just going to move out. But it was like once those last 2 just paid the other day on like the 23rd. And I was like, oh, thank God. Because last month it was the 30th. So I'm hoping the trend will continue a little bit and they'll get earlier. But yeah, it's definitely a different feeling. It is a really nice feeling too when, closing a deal, whether you're on the buy or sell side, like John was just talking about with closing statements and doing work and sellers and, trying to deal with people changing things on you at the last second. You don't really have that month to month. It's if you can get good tenants, you can get people paying, you can get them on, systems, especially if you can get them on electronic payments, you remove a lot of those headaches. And once you can get through renovation, or if you just buy stable deals that you're just going to do small changes to, it's a lot easier than trying to manage all these transactions constantly.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool space, like the 16 unit that you have, or like, the 30 units that we have. I know we're not going to live in this space forever, but I know all of my tenants' names still, I know like, oh yeah, whatever, 166B hasn't paid. Yeah, she pays on the 16th, it's kind of like a fun size to be right now because it has all those little quirks, but it is more satisfying, like you said, when you're a larger percentage of invested in the property. It's like you've got a lot of skin in it, so it's kind of makes a bigger hit when that rent comes in.
Yeah, for sure. Funny little thing. I was helping somebody look at this 12 unit probably last week or the week before, and it was this husband and wife that had owned these 12 units for 20 years basically. And they're going through all the different units and talking about the people. And they're like, I know how they live. And they get to this one guy and they're like, yeah, he's always short every month, but he gets us these massive 10-pound shrimp. So we just kind of forgive it. And he's like, every 2 weeks, we know when the boat's coming in. And like our friends are asking when the boat's coming in. He's like, I was just like, okay, so this guy's basically paying his rent in shrimp, which is absolutely ridiculous. But they owned it free and clear, right? They've owned it for whatever. I guess they like the guy. They've got like a wait list for like 8 of the units, even though they're 100% occupied, and it works, right? Like, it's just funny what people will do in this space when you own it so long and you have these payments coming in. And eventually over time, as you pay off the mortgage, or, it really appreciates in value, or you can, pay it off, what it can kind of do for you. And I guess for them, that shrimp, I don't know.
I mean, whatever does it for you.
Exactly. So
that's I would say that's the mobile home space, right? Like, cause it's not it's not different. When we bought this park, the tenant, sent us a check for like 400. The rent was 800. So we called and we said, what's up? We said, well, I mow the lawns, and the month that I mow the lawn, I don't have to pay full rent. And I was like, that's not. That may have been the agreement, but that is not the new agreement. He didn't care. He's like, oh, no, yeah, no, I just assumed it was the same thing. So, but yes, you see these quirky things in mom and pop long-term ownership that you don't normally see, like on a Toro deal. Nobody's taking out the garbage for 20% discount. Simultaneously, I don't know one of the tenants' names. So it's definitely a different world.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. So how are you finding deals? What types of deals are you looking for? Is it all single family stuff? Is it small multifamily? What are you guys looking to buy and why?
So the majority of our stuff is small multifamily. We buy most of our deals from wholesalers, mostly because I think the direct mail and direct to seller game that's like a whole business in itself. And I definitely want to get a little bit more into that. I was more involved in that when I was working with the house flipping company. But it's really, I have a lot of respect for wholesalers. That if that's run properly, that's quite the business. And we just don't have the setup for that right now. So we have a lot of really good wholesalers in my area. We've been really lucky with that. So we've got a good mix of single family and small multi. Our largest one is a 6-unit currently.
Gotcha.
And that was one of our most recent acquisitions. So we're starting to check out some other markets just because I know you guys both know New York space a little bit. So, New York is a landlord-tenant situation going on currently.
Debacle? Yeah, we could use the word debacle. It was the mobile home. We have 2 mobile home parks in New York, so we sold this one. And last year was tough, right? We only owned it for less than a year, but the first 3 months were great, no problems. And then as COVID continued, as we got into the holiday season, it was like we had 3 tenants that I'm not paying and I don't have to pay, and you can't do anything. Luckily, we owned it in cash. But New York, it's extremely difficult to operate.
Yeah.
It's a great business-friendly state, but a landlord state, it is not.
Yeah, we're currently working with a statewide landlord lobbying organization. So there's some stuff coming down the pipeline that we're hoping will change that a little bit. But, New York's always going to be New York. So we've been really lucky with our 30 units. We have 2 non-payers, one that's really trying and really working with us. And, I'm not going to evict somebody who's trying anyway, even if I could, I have faith that they're going to figure it out. They're going to pay us. The other one is a little bit more of the first situation you said, where she's like, what are you going to do about it?
So even we did it, not just on that small mobile home park, but if a tenant was working and communicating and showing and proving and doing the right thing, we weren't just throwing people out, right? New York, you can't, but in other states you were able to. It's for lack of a term, the shitheads that take advantage of the rules. Those are the people you have no sympathy for. The person that really lost their job and is getting back on the horse. And, we provided, even on the small mobile home park, month after month, here places that are hiring when they just don't want to do it. And, recently we went to everybody and said, hey, we'll wipe out a month's rent if you pay. And miraculously people can write checks again, which it's like, okay, well, you had a $4,000 delinquent. You just wrote me a $3,600 check. Like,
yeah,
come on, man. Like, yeah. Why? But
I've got one non-payer. She's like, oh, I'm going to be moving to North Carolina. And she hasn't paid in like 4 months. This is the one that's like, telling me to shove it basically. I'm like, how do you have the money to move to North Carolina and pay first month's rent and security and your moving expenses, but you don't have the money? So now she's not moving because she shockingly somehow got denied for that apartment in North Carolina. And she still can't pay rent though.
Yeah, it's
exactly.
An interesting place. So I'm curious too, because I think a lot of people that I speak with, start in the single family world, start in flipping. I mean, that's how I got started, and making that transition not only into the rental world, but then eventually into the multifamily space seems kind of daunting for a lot of people. And I try to encourage people that it's not so different. It's not a huge jump, especially as long as you're not going from a single family home to a 50 unit or, a crazy jump. Did you have like somebody to learn from, rely on? Like, how did you bridge that gap going from, the single family flipping to buying 30 units and one of them being, a 6-unit property?
So it's like I spent a lot of time working with a house flipping company down in Westchester. So I got to learn a lot from them. And then my first property was a single family house. And then my next purchase was one single family house and 2 duplexes in a 3-pack.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 5 units, but it was manageable because if I can buy a single family, I can buy a duplex and I can buy 2 duplexes, right? So then I bought that one. And then from there, we just scaled up slowly. So now our next jump is, hopefully going to be from 6-unit that we have to maybe something like a 30 or 40 in that kind of space. And so the more I've been talking to mentors and, people in that space, they're like, if you can do 6, you can do 30. It's roofs, it's furnaces, it's doors, it's windows, it's tenants. It's not that much different. Mm-hmm. And for me, I'm doing, 17 transactions or whatever it is to get to 30 units versus, what people are telling me, you do 1 transaction, you can buy 30 units, So if you can really get the fundamentals down, it's scaling it is not, as long as your systems are in place, that's, I don't think it's going to be that big of a jump.
I used to show a graphic so I did a ton of tax deed properties and I did a couple flips, but my bread and butter has been multifamily. Early on, 2014, 15, Chris, I might have even shown you when we originally started talking. I had a graphic where basically 2 people, one person buys a single family, then buys a duplex, then buys a quad, then buys an 8, then buys a 16, then buys a 30 unit over 5 years or 4 years or 3 years. The other person educates themselves enough, maybe buys a duplex or a single family and understands it. And that next transaction 30, and they're in the exact same position exponentially quicker. And then they take that 30, whether they sell at 1031 and buy a 100 unit or whatever, or they go raise money and they go down that path. But it's basically the exact same amount of work. There's nothing wrong with each way of doing it. Listen, there are people that slow and steady wins the race and they just want to do it that way. And that's phenomenal. And there are other people that say, listen, if it's 1 door, 2 doors, 3 doors, 1 furnace, 1 roof, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to go buy a 50-unit building. So there's no right or wrong way to do it, but you hit the nail on the head. What you do at a 1, 2, and a 4, and a 6, it's the exact same thing over 30, except for you don't have to drive around. You have one place. So no right or wrong way, but that graphic sometimes resonates with the right people. And then they can take that and, throw gasoline to the fire as opposed to the alternative, which still works, and people have to understand, just pick one. Instead of trying to think about it, just pick one option and run with it. So and that you're going to go execute it, which is awesome.
Yeah. And that's kind of how we decided, like we did 30 last year. We're doing 30 this year because I know what our expenses add up to, and I know what I cash flow per door. So at that point, we're fully covered with money left over to invest. So, more or less, if shit hits the fan when we go to large multi and I'm not cash flowing anything above covering my expenses, we're still going to be fine because we're covered in our small multi, which I know like the back of my hand at this point. So that's sort of what our strategy is going into the next year. But yeah, just like what you said.
I think that's the smartest thing. One of the smartest things that was said, on our 125 plus episodes or whatever it is, having a plan and working the plan, like you said, when I got the call, I was confirming the wire instructions. My wife's like, oh, good. Where's my money? I'm like, oh, no. We're investing that. I said, don't worry. The other stuff pays for everything, right? So if this shit hits the fan, oh, it's okay. I can get over it because we have the other stuff running. And at the end of the day, whether you buy 100 units self-storage, whatever you buy, it's that plan in mind of, okay, this is what I know really well. I executed on it to build the foundation. Once you have that solid foundation, sky's the limit. So you could mess it up brutally, but your bread and butter is already taken care of. So even if you get a black eye, you're going to get up to fight another round. You're not, it's not down and out because you overextended yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So are you guys full-time doing this? Are you working other jobs? Like, how are you guys putting together money to go out and purchase properties?
Yeah, so we have two different partners that we buy some of our properties with, and they bring capital to the business. So they're more or less passive, but they want to learn the business as well. So that's been a really good arrangement, because they bring money to the deals, but we bring, the market expertise and we're the operating partners. We do the management, we do all of that. So my husband quit his job last year. I was a realtor before that. And when I had my son 6 months ago, I more or less went full time because I'm not going to be running around buyers and, that kind of thing while I have my son at home. So yeah, we are full time now. And with a combination of, fundraising and partners who bring equity to the deals, we haven't had to really go outside of that.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And I think that's really important because I think so many people look at, either I've got to raise, money in, these big syndications or really, do something, or I've got to do it myself. And, I think there's always a happy middle ground or a way to make deals work. I was just talking with somebody that said, look, if you come across a deal, here's like the 5 ways we can get it done. And I was like, I knew it already, but it's the type of thing where it's, there's more than one option when you come across something. So as you find deals, whether it's from a wholesaler, you're going direct to owner, if you have those connections in that network that you build up with people who are also actively looking to do things, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah. And we do the, typical BRRRR model. Mm-hmm. So like we buy heavily distressed. We do a lot of renovation. But I've built a relationship with my hard money lender where it's 100% funded on the in. So there's not a ton of capital that I have to come up with to get into the deal. Mm-hmm. And then when we, refinance it on the way out, we're not necessarily refinancing 100% cost out at this point, but we're not leaving much into it. So to keep the momentum going, we're not leaving, $50,000 in each property. That if I was in that kind of market, I'd have to move a lot slower.
Mm-hmm. So are you buying things that are already vacant, or are you buying properties that are occupied and then, doing the renovation process?
We buy both ways. Given that we're in New York, currently, if we're buying occupied, we're factoring 12 months of holding cost into the buy just because, I don't know what I'm going to get into when I get in there. So I prefer vacant because I know my screening process is on point. And if I can get a tenant that I have screened into that property, knock on wood, I'm not going to have an issue. But we do buy occupied. And I think the reason we do that is because there's an opportunity there. And a lot of people in New York won't take the risk anymore, which is fine. But for me, it's all just about calculated risk. So if I can put a number on that, I know that within a year I can get them out or paying. So that works for us. Mm-hmm.
When you have somebody that is paying though, and I don't know if that happens a lot or not with everything going on, do you look to keep that person in for the remainder of their lease? Do you look to do cash for keys? Like for you, and one thing, I'm looking at as well is, when you're in that BRRRR game, time literally becomes money, right? Mm-hmm. The quicker you can do it, the quicker you can get your money back and go do it again. So there is incentive to be like, hey, instead of this person for 12 months, right? Let's say the day you close, they sign a new lease, instead of getting a paying tenant for 12 months, you look at it and say, okay, I can give this person $500, $1,000, $2,000. They'll leave at the 3rd month, renovate, release, go do it again. Or you like
not my tenants. Not my tenants. Cash for keys is great in theory, but every time that we've come up against it, it's like, well, you got to give me the money up front or I don't have the money to move. And I'm like, I'm not giving you money until you're out of my property, Mm-hmm. So the current situation in New York, and it's different everywhere, but my policy is just don't rock the boat. If they're in there and they're going to pay, I'll work around you. That's fine. I'll figure it out. But, a lot of these landlords come in with the old tactics of like, pay your rent or get out. And it's like, well, that's great when you can enforce it. But you can't enforce that right now in New York, What are you going to do? So we've really taken the approach of like, we're here to help you. We're here to figure this out. We're not the big bad landlord here to get you and get your money. We're trying to make sure that you don't end up with a huge judgment at the end of this situation, because that's obviously not a good situation for you. So we really, if I have a tenant in place and they're going to pay, especially, then I'm not going to rock the boat. I'm going to keep that tenant in place because, worst case scenario, I'm going to say, hey, I need you to leave. And they're going to say, F you, I'm not leaving. And now I'm mad, so I'm not paying either.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
So that's kind of our philosophy on that.
I think it makes sense. I think it comes back to the point of understanding what you can and can't do in your market, understanding, the reality of what you're doing, and that not everybody's tactic that you read about online is going to be directly applicable to your market or the deal you're doing or your strategy. So I think it's really important to back into and reverse engineer, a strategy that works. And then, like you said, you underwrite every deal to 12 months of holding costs because there's a very real chance that can happen. So, where somebody else might be able to buy a deal for 70% of, what you think the ARV is of that deal, you may have to do cheaper because it's going to cost you a lot more and take longer than somebody else, right? Everybody says what is it? It's ARV minus costs and then times 70% or 75, and that's what you should offer. That doesn't mean it's going to apply in your market. It could be more, it could be less. So I think that's super important. And I think, you're a really good example of that.
Yeah. And when you say that formula, I basically use that same formula. I just factor those 12 months in as a cost.
Gotcha.
So I use the same formula. I just factor that in as if it's going to happen. And then I put that money into a reserve account when we close on the property. Mm-hmm.
It's funny. When I first started flipping houses, it was 60 or 65%. Yeah. Right now, time has changed, right? I know there's people in Long Island right now that are doing 85%, right? Your margin is becoming so little that 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago. But these are things that, the market's dictating change. And if you want to be competitive, you either shit or get off the pot at the end of the day. But when you stick to those principles, like you said, that formula works. I just got to add some extra cost in, right? And if I use them, I use them. If I don't, I win. But at the end of the day, knowing that probably saves you a lot of heartburn and headache on deals that may or may not work, because 2020 was a year no one's ever seen before. I'm very confident New York will postpone this eviction forever. And when I say forever, I mean the foreseeable future. Like, there's no intention. So all these properties that have just sat, they're difficult. I mean, we just turned down a couple of new deals for that exact reason. I said, listen, I can't. We lost a $10,000 deposit because I just had no intentions of, it would have been a fight. It would have cost me $20,000, but I said, it's not worth it. It's significantly cheaper for me to lose the deposit than try and fight this with 27 out of 50 tenants not having paid rent in 7 years. It's like, okay, well, we put it under contract before Corona. Now my business plan is shot. I can't even get them out. So just understanding that in your market is super important.
So Kayla, what are, I know you said you're looking at, doing the 30 units this year and maybe one property, maybe two, basically less property, same number of units. But what are you guys, what's the goal for you guys? What are you guys trying to work towards? What are you trying to build ultimately?
So this year we're actually looking to do 30 units in approximately the same property sizes that we've been doing.
Okay.
Because we have a proven business model for that at this point that works for us. So once we have the 60 units, I know I'm covered plus. So then I can, I can take more risks after that, and I can go from there. I can move into the larger property size. I can change the business model a little bit. We can try different things and know that at the end of the day, we're totally covered. So yeah, that's the goal for this year. Our ultimate goal, we have just kind of a unit number in mind that we're shooting for between me and my husband. And at the end of the day, when we were goal setting, we're like, well, what do we want to do, for making more money? We would really like to focus on charity work. Mm-hmm. And providing housing for, single mothers is something that my husband's just really passionate about. And so that's something that we think there's a lack of affordable housing in New York State, which is proven. And so we're trying to keep that in mind with our business model, but also, be able to have enough units that we can afford to dedicate some of those units to housing people who really do have some real need there.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think obviously anybody listening would, is impressed by that. And I think that's a great goal. I think one thing that's key that maybe a lot of people are going to miss in what you just said or not pick up on or extrapolate is that as your unit count rises, you're keeping your living costs the same and you're not growing beyond what your portfolio becomes or growing with it, so that you always need more, you always need more, you always need to go bigger, and that you guys have a goal in mind for, how you want to live your life or the lifestyle that you want to have. And you've structured, your business plan around that, which I think is so important. And not that there's anything wrong with somebody in Rochester saying, I need 60 units or I need 90 units or I need 3,000 units. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Everybody's got their own lifestyle, but the fact that you guys have figured out what you want, and maybe it changes, maybe it doesn't, but understanding how that relates to it and being like, okay, once we start making more, we're not going to go out and buy a Porsche. We're just going to do whatever, right? We're just going to be comfortable and live our life. So I think that's huge, because I think that's such an overstated thing that you kind of just skirted right by it, because I guess it sounds like it's probably just second nature to you. But I think I
have that little itch in the back of my head where I don't need 60 units, I need all the units. That's how I feel every day. I need to buy all the units, but it's not so I can go out and buy a fancy car. I just really have a love of building the business and making it run and making it more efficient, and then that continual growth. I went to school for theater design technology, which is such a fluffy thing compared to what I do now. Mm-hmm. And that was just, a big part of how I knew that wasn't right for me, is it was just missing these, I need solid targets and metrics that I can drive toward and hit. And another thing that just I want to mention really quick is a lot of people are like, well, why can't you just forgive your tenants' background, and why can't you just let them stay? Everyone's having a hard time right now. And I can't run my business like a charity, because I'm running my business to build a charity at the end of the day. If I run my business like a charity, I'm never going to get anywhere, So that's something that really is stuck with me in the back of my head when we have had to make some of those tough decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to do it. Anybody that's built a charity or donated money to charity, had to get to a place where they built up money to do it or resources. So there was there's always that period of getting to a point where you can give back. You can't give back if you have nothing. So, and you are providing, a service that people need for, in an open market, which, means it's fairly priced, or hopefully fairly priced, or maybe even a discount, right? I don't know what your guys' business model is. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think people just get too uptight because, it's a basic necessity. But, we don't talk the same way about, grocery stores or food providers, or, a little bit with medicine and stuff, but, it's definitely very different. So it is always a little bit of a touchy subject, but I think you obviously have a clear goal in mind to, address that in the future. And I love, how you guys are going about it, and, that you have included it in, your business plan, your future, and in your conversations as you're continuing to grow. Outside of that, though, are you guys just looking to buy stuff for yourself? Is the model always going to be this BRRRR strategy where, use other people's money to acquire, refinance them out, is what I'm assuming. It doesn't sound like they stay on as partners. Or are you looking to grow beyond that and bring in actual partners? How are you guys looking at the future, and what's your reasoning behind it?
So we are looking to move into larger multifamily, and we do have a model where our partners stay on as partners. So they're working into more operational roles, but they have a somewhat lower equity split than what you might expect for someone who was maybe bringing a large percentage of the money and then getting refinanced out, if that makes sense. So they're starting with a lower percentage. They're not taking any sort of interest payments on their money until the property is refinanced. Then they make profit just like an operating partner. They don't make interest payments. Mm-hmm. So when we're moving into larger multifamily, we'll definitely be looking into more of a fundraising type of model. We do have a couple of partners that are already ready to hop onto the larger multifamily next year, but we just really want to get our single family, small multifamily business squared away this year, so we're not putting the cart before the horse and getting ahead of ourselves. Yeah, but as far as the larger multifamily space goes, we're still researching. We're still deciding exactly how we want to go about that. We're talking to other people who are already in the space, talking to our attorney, and kind of hammering some of that stuff out, because at the end of the day, it is still very much the same on the physical, house side, but it's a little bit different when you go into the fundraising and contracts and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I was talking with a buddy of mine who does a lot of the same BRRRR stuff with smaller multifamily. I think he has I want to say 90 units, but I could be wrong, honestly, up in the New Hampshire and New England area. And we were talking about the same thing where it's he doesn't really want partners, but he said it's tougher and tougher to find these deals where the numbers make sense. Mm-hmm. I said, look, honestly, what you should do, I said, there's probably plenty of deals where he had the same formula, right? ARV minus costs at 70%, and it made sense, right? I said, I bet you there's probably plenty of deals that you found that were at 80%. And he's like, yeah, and we passed on them. I said, you should really, that next time you find a deal, do the math with having your investors get, instead of them getting 10, 12, 14, 15, 8% on a refinance, run the scenario where you guys are partners on money going in, and then you refinance them 80% of their money, or instead of giving them a return, and then they keep 25% of the equity. Because I said, what'll probably happen is, yes, they're going to be a partner in that deal, but you probably would have accumulated more cash flow, but spread across more deals quicker if you had been willing to do those deals than looking for the perfect deals that satisfies that requirement. So it's an interesting subject, right? Because not having partners once you refinance, which I think you do, is obviously great, right? Because you and your husband, as the only partners, can just do whatever you want with it. Once you start bringing in partners, it changes it. But there is something to be said for that give and take a little bit of hey, we'll keep you on, but we have control and you're just a silent partner type thing. You could probably make your money and assets go a little bit further as well.
Right. And when you're, doing the math, something's got to give, right? If the margin's getting tighter, well, then how can we bring the cost down? So before, if I had to pay, say it's hard money, if I had to pay 12% interest on that, entire amount of money, that's a big part of the cost. So if I can eliminate that cost up front, even if I'm splitting the equity long term, it's making a win for me because my costs go down, and it's making a win for them because now they're an equity partner, not just getting interest payments. So there's tax benefits for them. They're happy. They want to come back. They're bringing their money back over and over again. So yeah, if you can get a little bit creative like that, I think it creates a win-win for everybody at the long run.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that I always looked at it, that I have an investor who, I love. He's probably one of our best, if not my favorite investor. And
tell them all that, right? They're all
exactly. And I didn't mention his name, so they don't know who I'm talking about.
Exactly.
If they listen.
And if they ask, it was you for sure.
Yeah, that was you I was talking about. Everybody, right? I'm going to go follow up calls. But you got to listen to the episode because I talk about you in the episode. But no, listen, at the end of the day, there is something to be said about owning a deal with nobody, yourself, your husband, just you, Chris, your dad, there's something to be said about the investor relations and the reporting. But there's also something to be said about I only can afford and do so many deals because of the cost, because of the margins or whatever. So if you can look at the margins and, like I said, get creative and or back into a way to make it incentivized, taking a smaller piece of a bigger pie is like eating a big pie or eating a small pie by yourself. So there may be some elements of that you might not like maybe some investor reporting or something like that. But you don't have to go from buying a deal that you could afford with a hard money loan to refinance to buying a 250 unit, $30 million deal with 25, 30, 40 investors. There's a happy medium in between that. And I think the way that you just decide, say, oh, well, I normally borrow the money at 12. Well, if you give it to me at 6, but I'll also give you a 10% stake or whatever that structure looks like, you're going to make more money at the end of the day by getting into something that you may or may not have been able to because of other factors. So it's turning lemons into lemonade for sure, as opposed to complaining and figuring, oh, well, this isn't going to work. I'm going to go do something else. Or there's so many idiots buying deals that you got to play the cards you're dealt. And sometimes you don't always have the perfect opportunity, but the people that are super successful and figure it out are those. It's like, well, you know what? I got to figure this piece out. But when I do, it's another tool in my tool belt. Now I can go do something else.
Yeah, exactly. And I have people that reach out to me on Instagram or wherever a lot, and they're like, oh, if I only had $1 million, then I could, buy however many units or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, well, I wish I had $1 million too. And I could just buy 1 million units all by myself. And then this business would be easy and everybody would do it. Just stop complaining. Some parts are easy. Some parts are harder. You just got to figure out the hard parts and work through it. So yeah, fundraising was an initial hiccup for us, but we just figured out a model that worked. And I guess ultimately we're looking to scale this exact model to larger multifamily because it's working for us.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I think too, one thing to consider, and I spoke to him about this as well, is, just because you want to hold every single deal doesn't mean you have to hold every single deal, right? It could be one of those deals where maybe you only own it for 3 years, but guess what? That's going to make you money that you wouldn't have made otherwise if you had passed on it. So yes, maybe it's not the perfect fit for what you guys are trying to do. And yeah, maybe it sucks. You did all this renovation and building and processes and putting tenants in, and you're going to sell it off to somebody else and it's not yours anymore. But by doing that, it's going to allow you to take that money and repurpose it into something that you can hold for 15 years. So, there is a little bit of give and take in this business, right? There is, unfortunately, it's not always, if you want to scale and you don't have millions of dollars or $1 million, anybody can just buy, deals and have $1 million in equity, right? But to build $1 million in equity is not as easy. I just bought the 16 unit. I would love to own it for 15 years because I think it's going to be a really great project in a really great area. But I also recognize that if I want to execute on a 10-year business plan and start scaling up into larger assets, that may not be feasible because I'm going to have equity sitting there that even after refinance, I may have to repurpose that into, GP equity to be a 10% equity partner and raise the other 90%. So, there is going to be that give and take and some decisions that have to be made. And that's why it's important not to fall in love with deals, even though sometimes it's tough. But those are the things you kind of have to weigh up as you're looking at deals and consider, and just understand that it's not always going to be a perfect fit, but there's plenty of ways to make a deal happen.
Yeah. And we're looking at the same thing. Some of our first houses we're thinking probably towards the end of this year, we might be looking at, selling them off. And that's going to be a great, first time buy for some homeowner in that neighborhood. And for us, it's going to help catapult us into larger multifamily. So Yep, they serve their purpose while they serve it.
Yeah, 100%. I think we're, getting a good place to wrap up. I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing your thoughts and experiences and, giving people a little, glimpse into what you guys are doing. Cause I think it's something that a lot of people could replicate or work their way towards. If people want to learn more about you, get in touch with you, follow you, where can they do all that stuff?
The easiest place to reach me is probably Instagram, that landlady on Instagram. Mm-hmm. Or you can go to our website, it's graycapitalgroup.com.
Okay. Awesome. Guys, definitely go check her out. Go follow her. I'm sure she's got a ton of great other information that you can go check out and learn from. But thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you're not already subscribed, it would mean the world to John and I if you would do so. And if you are, please send it to someone that would get a tremendous amount of value from this episode. Kayla, once again, thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. This was fun.